a criticism that lawmakers really get is there's a lot of calls for action after a giant tragedy like that one. You can name various American cities where shootings have happened. Calls for action, and then the news cycle moves quickly on. Why do lawmakers, Democrats and Republicans, always reach that impasse? And it seems like there are tiny trickles that get done, but not leaps that Americans want to see.
Well, I can point to one thing that I think is very significant, and that is our legislative process is the Senate has to get to a supermajority in order to end debate, and that has always put the brakes on responding to the immediacy of a horrific gun violence episode. The moment that the nation is focused and ready to see Congress act, the way the Senate is constituted, 1/3 of the Senate is elected in any given election period. And so the other 2/3 of the Senate, those folks that oppose gun safety legislation, they'd simply know that the heat of the moment is going to cool down and pass, and the American public and the news cycle is going to move on. And so they're willing to continue to accept the donations of the gun lobby, and I'm speaking mainly of Republicans. Republicans not only face the gun lobby in terms of donations, they also face a significant part of their base in primary elections. And so think about who turns out for primaries. It's not the majority of the community. It is a segment of the Republicans that turn up. But those fervent gun rights folks, the extremists, they have an outsized voice in those primaries. And so the 2/3 of the Senate that's responsive and feels they are afraid of a primary opponent, they're also afraid of that. So, but I do believe that a fix is to address this issue of the filibuster, that when it comes down to just a majority vote in the Senate, it's much harder, I think, for there to be a situation where just a bare majority of the Senate is not possible. We need to, I think, do filibuster reform. But short of that, we're going to continue to see the Senate be an instrument of delay, obstruction, but delay and forget.
Where do you think filibuster reform talks are at right now?
The filibuster has long moved past any kind of credibility of good government. There's some arguments for why you want to drive filibuster. You want a filibuster because the argument is that you're going to get a bipartisan result. But largely the filibuster, in my view, has become an instrument of obstructionism, and it's gotten in the way of America being able to move forward. And I would rather take the risk that the opposition party, my Republican colleagues will get the majority and will take advantage of a majority vote. But I have faith that the American people are going to be the ultimate brakes on extremism, that the filibuster has not been a brake on extremism. To the contrary, the filibuster has become an instrument of extremism, and the evidence is in the failure to do anything more substantive about gun violence in our country.
Congressman, I do want to move on to where the GOP support is specifically on your bill. Obviously, all of the co-authors, including yourself, are Democrats. But when I spoke to Senator Ed Markey about 2 weeks ago, he said he is trying to get Republicans on board. He hasn't yet, though. How has that endeavor been going?
Well, we've just introduced a bill. I have ideas about certain Republicans I can approach. Guns are, a very difficult issue for my Republican colleagues, but there are a number of Republican colleagues who represent districts that President Biden either came close in or won. And, I think those Republicans are some of the Republicans that we first ought to engage in conversations. But I also think that the idea of research should be something that would appeal to more Republicans than even Republicans that represent close districts.
Democrats and Republicans, obviously, for years now, have had differing views and ideas on how to keep communities safe from gun violence. The Safe Students Act, reintroduced after the Nashville shooting by your colleague, Representative Thomas Massie, would repeal the Gun-Free School Zones Act of 1990 and, quote, would make it easier for state and local governments and school boards to unambiguously set their own firearms policies. Is this a type of legislation that you would support?
I would not. I don't think, what that legislation suggests and what it is aiming toward is the idea of arming school officials, arming security officials, but arming teachers, arming other maybe administrators. This, I think, is a crazy idea. I don't think that schools will become safer because teachers are packing heat. The idea that I certainly, as a teacher, I was a teacher for 24 years before I became a member of Congress. I can say that a teacher has a lot going on. And I think the last thing the teacher needs to be expected to do is to somehow have a firearm in the classroom or access to one. Would the teacher wear it on their person? I can just imagine a number of scenarios in a classroom where a teacher wearing a firearm and other students knowing about it would be a potential situation, a very dangerous situation. I have concerns about a teacher's the way in which firearms might get used. We've had concerns about police shootings. I don't think we need to introduce another element of social division where a shooting occurs at a high school or middle school, and there is an element of racial bias that might enter into all of this. There's a whole heck of a lot of considerations that have to be given to what it would mean for school officials to quote unquote make a school safer by allowing teachers and other school personnel have weapons on their person.
When I've talked to your Democratic lawmaker colleagues, they've all said that they've wanted, the ones that I've specifically asked, wanted an assault weapons ban, but they hoped that that wasn't a non-starter for Republicans. Do you think hardening schools is a non-starter for Democrats?
Well, if hardening schools means to arm teachers, to arm administrators, I don't think that's a great idea. I think better to make schools and their surroundings gun-free zones. That's a better idea. I think having red flag laws be implemented that we can identify, have red flag laws be part of a strategy to have citizens come forward when they know that somebody is mentally unstable and has weapons, to have those weapons be at least temporarily separated from that individual. I think we have other strategies that we can put in place in lieu of arming teachers, and arming teachers and school administrators and school personnel is, I think, just an ill thought through, knee-jerk sort of reaction to extreme ideologues who do not want to face up to the fact that the easy access to weaponry is the source of our problems, and the solution is not to have an arms race. So if hardening our schools is an arms race with people who have guns, that is the logic of that. Just the logic of it, I think, is wrong.